First, I would like to start by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to speak on my behalf. I know this has been a long process for everyone involved, and I would like to thank everyone, all of the law enforcement and the medical staff and the justice system for all of the time and resources they've spent on finding out what happened to my baby. I also would like to thank my family for all the love and support that they have given me throughout the 16 months of me being incarcerated. I know this process has been equally as hard for them as it has been for me, and I appreciate them for not giving up on me even after all the mistakes that I've made. I know that there are no words that I could say that will bring baby D back, but I want to let you all know that I've learned from this full experience. Being away from my son and my family has showed me how I was blinded by an addiction, and that was taking over every aspect of my life. My addiction stopped me from doing what I love most, which is being a mother to my two children. Instead of reaching out and utilizing the help that was offered to me, I turned to drugs, and that led to the death of my son, which is the biggest punishment of all. Every day I wake up and I know that I'm to blame for his loving soul no longer being here. I know I will never be able to forgive myself for putting something so stupid like drugs before the children I've birthed. And Tamir and Derrick both deserve to be put first, and I failed to do that. When I lost baby D, I lost a piece of myself. He was such a happy spirit, always laughing and giving me so much love. When he looked at me with those big, beautiful eyes, I could tell that I was his favorite person in the world. And every time he smiled, I knew he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I will forever miss the way he made me feel when I was sad, him staring at me with kissy lips, trying to kiss and hug me until I stopped crying. But those are just a few of the many things that I will always remember about him. Now that Derrick is gone, I want to use his death as a learning lesson and to make myself a better person and mother for him and his brother Tamir. I've used my time being incarcerated to learn more about self-love. I've strengthened my relationship with God, and I've put a lot of time and energy into staying sober. I've been attending Narcotic Anonymous classes, Bible studies, and I even got baptized at the jail. Even though I'm almost a year and a half sober, my journey to sobriety doesn't stop when I leave prison. The real journey of healing starts once I'm out and back in the society. My plan for after I'm released includes outpatient treatment to help with my drug addiction. Also, I want to find a grief counselor to help me cope with the death of my son. I know without this outside help, staying sober will be a lot harder. And I also want to attend NA classes and groups regularly and find a psychiatrist to help with my mental health and childhood trauma. But my main priority for when I am released is to reconnect with my son Tamir and also to maintain my sobriety and mental health so that I can be the best mom, sister, and daughter that I know I can be.
Thank you. This court has to take into consideration a number of factors in determining an appropriate sentence. Those include the serious nature of the offense, and in this case, there's 2 files, your character, Ms. Putzlocker, and the need to protect the public. I'm going to talk about the case involving your son first, and every comment really seems to apply to each of those factors because they're very overlapping in this situation. The facts point to how serious the offense is, and obviously the ultimate death of your son shows how horribly serious this is, which calls for the need to protect the public. But when I talk about the facts, there's a lot of overlap with your character, or lack thereof. That might be a better way to describe some of it. The facts are horrifyingly tragic. It's littered with betrayal and deceit. And it just is something that is absolutely astonishing, because every measure that was put in place to protect your son, you violated, willingly, deliberately, and intentionally. And that cannot be understated. And the other thing that's really, I think, a bit astonishing is to act like this is somehow Mr. Young's offense, that he's somehow responsible for the death of your son and you're not. And that really is some of the message I've been sent here today. And I don't see it that way at all, Ms. Putzlocker. I see you as at least equally, maybe more responsible. You were to protect your son. You talked about you're his favorite person in the world. You should have protected him. When the Child Protection Services removed your son and your other son, well, you know, here's the problem with this. I don't even know the baby's name.
The deceased, Derrick.
Derrick.
Young III.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've heard Baby D. I don't have a true name. So when your son was removed from your care along with your other child, it was because of this horrible drug raid that had occurred at the father, Derrick Young's residence. Now, that put you on notice, as if you weren't already on notice, as to what was happening. They found something like 1,000 and some fentanyl pills, and this material was within reach of the baby. The reason I point that out is that was so serious that your children were removed. Ultimately, there was a court order. And what did you do as a result of that? You continued to associate with Mr. Young. You continued to use fentanyl. And then you had the children put back in your residence, despite the fact that you were not to have placement of the children. And if you did have the children, it was to be supervised visitation. And you went to such great lengths to betray everybody about that. If there was going to be a home visit at your dad's house in Appleton, where these children were placed, you brought the children over there. If there was going to be a visitation at your residence, you made sure the children were gone. The deceit is astonishing. And then, after it was determined that your child died because of the exposure to fentanyl, which you could have protected him from, your father and Mr. Young's mother lied about everything. Mr. Young's mother not only said that the child was supervised, she even came up with a story about how she was there, how she had parked her car, none of which was true. And I have to wonder, why did they do this? Why did your father, why was he deceitful about this? I don't know if you asked these people to do this or what happened, but the reality of it is you were the one who knew what the order was. You were the one that knew you were not supposed to have these children in your care, and look what happened as a result of your neglectful behavior. Coupled with this kind of deceit, it's simply so horrifying, because the reason your children weren't supposed to be in your care, and thankfully your other child wasn't that day, because I don't know what would have happened. I'm asked to speculate, completely speculate as to where the drugs came from. These pictures don't tell me anything. They do show me, looks like you keep a clean house. That's really wonderful, but this is only some of the rooms. The bathroom isn't pictured in here, and the information is that the smoking of the fentanyl occurred in the bathroom. I don't know if there was something in the trash in the bathroom. I don't know if it was on your clothes. I don't know if it was on your hands. I don't know if it was on Mr. Young's, but I can't conclude that it was just on Mr. Young in any way, shape, or form, even if he was laying next to the child, because we all know that children can ingest in some way, shape, or form, be exposed to fentanyl, and they don't die immediately. This is all we have to do is watch the news, read articles, we know this is what happens. So that's not particularly useful to me, meaning it doesn't somehow excuse your behavior to say that we don't really know what happened, because you've admitted throughout this whole pre-sentence report, and I appreciate the honesty, you admitted that you were using, you admitted the baby was in your care and shouldn't have been, you admitted the child wasn't supervised and should have been. And it's not only the father of the child that was addicted to and using fentanyl, you were as well. So you put the child at as great of risk as he did. And you knew what he was doing, the father of the child, because you knew of that intervening DTF raid. You knew that he was selling, he was providing you with the fentanyl you were smoking. So it's not as if you were unaware of what was happening. So I say that that kind of overlaps everything because it tells me a lot about your character as well as tells me how serious this offense is. And it clearly shows the need to protect the public. The information I've just discussed really illustrates all three of those factors and their importance. As I've indicated, my concern then, Ms. Putzlocker, is your behavior was just so deliberate. It was knowing, it was deceptive. And this all occurred while you were on bond for another offense, which I think notes some discussion as well. A time where you were driving. Two witnesses talk about the fact that you were just speeding, and I think they both used the word blew past them. Two different people in two different vehicles. And you ran a red light and smashed into another car. That car rolled over multiple times, and the person driving that car was injured. That's a really serious offense as well. Again, that's telling me a little bit more about your character. Now that offense, if my math is right, occurred when you were 21. The death of your child occurred when you were 22, and you're 23 now. So yes, I understand there's no prior record, but we're talking about somebody very young, and these are the offenses before me. The agent preparing the pre-sentence report, I think, really summarizes not only the offense, but your background really well on page 26, and I'm going to read a large portion of that. The agent says Ms. Putzlocker was actively using fentanyl and admitted to having fentanyl in the form of black market Percocets in her residence. As a result of her choice to have and use fentanyl in her home, her son was exposed to the drug and died as a result. He was only 17 months old and was dependent on his parents to care for him and protect him from danger. It is clear Ms. Putzlocker was more concerned with feeding her addiction than protecting her child. She was emotional and expressed remorse for her actions during her interview, and it felt she was genuine. However, as much love as she had for her child, she failed to prioritize her son's needs above her own. Ms. Putzlocker will have to live the rest of her life knowing her actions led to her son's death. The agent goes on to say that, and basically summarizes your childhood and talking about the fact that you had some struggles. Your parents struggled with not only the utilization of substances, but also criminal behavior, and that there had been a lot of bouncing around and homelessness and issues as it related to that when you were a young person, and that when you were in high school, you met Mr. Young and started in a relationship with him, and he introduced you to cocaine and fentanyl. And that second paragraph ends with Ms. Putzlocker acknowledged she knew Mr. Young was selling drugs, yet she chose to remain in the relationship. She resumed using cocaine and fentanyl after the birth of her son, the victim in this case, and it led to an addiction. Instead of, and then there's a discussion about this incident that I've already referred to in November of 2021 when DTF raided Mr. Young's house and located loaded firearms and illegal drugs, which were easily accessible to the two boys. It says, as a result, Child Protective Services became involved with Miss Putzlocker and her children. Instead of viewing this as an intervention to make changes to her lifestyle, Ms. Putzlocker continued to use illegal drugs and associate with Mr. Young. While she was required to have no unsupervised contact with her children, the defendant admitted the children were returned to her in January of 22 by her father, who had placement. She failed to notify her caseworker of the children residing with her and admitted she took steps to deceive Child Protection Services regarding the location of the children. It was approximately 5 months later that her son died from exposure to fentanyl while in her care. At the end of that page, the agent says Ms. Putzlocker had opportunities to address her addiction and comply with Child Protective Services, but continued to place her children in danger. Her young son lost his life due to the environment she knowingly placed him in, an environment he was not allowed to be in. When I look at all of that, Ms. Putzlocker, I find that this is such a serious offense. It just screams for protection of the public. Your son deserved the protection that the system was there to provide. You did everything in your power to make sure that that protection wasn't in place for him, and were deceptive about it on various levels, multiple levels. And as a result, he died, obviously the most tragic and significant of consequences. When I look at your character, I can't just look at the fact that you're young and you have no prior record. I have to look at all of that, as I've already indicated. And I can't agree then that the recommended joint sentence, the sentence that's being recommended jointly, is appropriate. It's simply too low. It unduly depreciates the seriousness of the offense. It doesn't take into consideration your character and all of the information I've just described, and it certainly doesn't provide adequate protection to the public. So instead, I'm going to sentence you to 15 years in the Wisconsin State. If there's any more outbursts, you can all exit the courtroom now. This woman here needs to leave. Ma'am, you need to leave the courtroom now.
My baby! My baby!
I sentence you to 15 years in the Wisconsin State Prison System, to be bifurcated as 10 years of initial confinement and 5 years of extended supervision. You'll receive credit for 501 days previously served.